child that screamed in reverse. Chapter 1. The Cry That Played Backward. It began on a rainy Thursday, the kind that made every window shudder and every light flicker just enough to feel off. 11-year-old Nora was alone in the living room, flipping through dusty VHS tapes she'd found in the back of the hall closet. They weren't labeled, just blank gray rectangles with scuffed black reels inside, old, forgotten. Her mother was upstairs, her father, now just a framed photo on the mantel. One tape stood out, not because of what was written on it, but because of what wasn't. No markings, no dust, no label, like it had been waiting. She slipped it into the ancient VCR. The machine growled, hissed, and clicked. Then the screen lit up. A child, backlit by twilight, standing at the edge of a field. Then came the sound. Not a voice, not words, a scream, but backward. It didn't come out as a sharp, piercing wail. It sucked inward, like the air itself was being pulled into the lungs of the past. Nora felt her chest tighten, as if something were being taken from her. The child on the screen didn't move. His mouth was open, eyes wide, but his scream reversed, looped, distorted, dragged through the speakers like a vacuum sucking time backward, and then cut to static. Nora ejected the tape. She was shaking. The tape was hot in her hand. When her mom came downstairs, Nora asked about the tape. "Well, we don't have a tape like that," her mom said, distracted. "Maybe one of the neighbors left it." But that night, Nora dreamed of the child. He stood at the end of her bed, mouth open, screaming in reverse. And when she woke up, the television in the living room was on. The same scream played on loop, getting faster and louder, like it was trying to find its way forward again. Chapter 2. The tape recorder in the attic. The attic was the one place Nora avoided. It wasn't the dust or the cobwebs or even the way the floor creaked like it was whispering warnings with every step. It was the feeling. The weight of silence pressed into every corner, as if the space remembered things too loudly. But after the tape, after the scream, something pulled her up there. The next day, just after sunset, Nora climbed the ladder. She didn't tell her mom. She just waited until the dishes were done, until the house settled into its usual quiet, and then she disappeared into the ceiling. It was colder than she expected, not the usual drafty chill. This cold was focused, deliberate. She waved her flashlight around, passing boxes marked Christmas and old clothes, until it landed on something strange, a small metal case sitting in the middle of the floor, completely untouched by dust. Inside it was a tape recorder. Not digital, not new, heavy, clunky from the 80s, maybe earlier, and next to it, a cassette. This one was labeled, but the writing was backward. Not reversed like a mirror, written backward, sloppily. She slid the tape in and pressed play. Static. Then, a voice. But it wasn't speaking, it was laughing. Only backward. The laugh rolled and pitched in reverse, the joy sucked out of it, leaving something jagged and broken behind. Then, a child's voice screamed, but it didn't echo out. It crumpled inward like the sound had been folded in on itself. Then a second voice, soft, gentle, familiar. Nora. She dropped the recorder. It hit the attic floor hard but didn't break. The laughter stopped. The cold deepened. And in the flashlight's beam she saw tiny footprints leading away from the tape. Backward. Chapter 3. Static where laughter should be. The living room had gone quiet. Too quiet. Nora sat in front of the TV again. She hadn't planned to watch another tape, not after the attic, but the VCR had turned itself on, the same tape she was sure sat halfway ejected, waiting. Her hand trembled as she pushed it back in. The screen blinked, static, then flickered into life. This time it wasn't the field. It was the inside of a house, a hallway, familiar wallpaper, familiar creaks. It looked like hers. Then came the laughter. At least it should have been laughter. But something was wrong. The sound twisted itself mid-air, too sharp, too long. It started as laughter, yes, but then bent, stretched, reversed. What should have been joy turned to screeching static, glitching like a corrupted file. The screen flickered with every pitch. Nora watched, frozen. A child ran past the camera, backward. Not just reversed footage, the movement was unnatural, jerky, like the child was being dragged in reverse by invisible strings. Her pigtails didn't swing, they hovered. Nora paused the tape. The screen froze. The child was looking straight into the lens. Her eyes were black holes, her mouth wide open. No scream, no sound. Just silence. Until the static returned, blasting from the speakers as if something had broken loose. Nora covered her ears, but the noise wasn't coming from the TV anymore. It was in the walls. From the hallway, she heard a laugh that collapsed into static. Then silence. Then a whisper, "Why won't you laugh with me?" The TV powered off by itself, and behind Nora on the wall, tiny handprints formed in the dust, perfectly spaced and reversed. Chapter 4. She only speaks in echoes. Nora didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the girl's face. The dark eyes, the twisted mouth, the way her laughter warped into static. It was burned into her memory, as if the tape hadn't just played on the screen, but etched itself into her brain. The next morning, her mother asked why she looked so tired. Nora didn't answer. She couldn't. Her voice felt strange in her throat, like something had been crawling through it all night. When she finally tried to speak, the words didn't come out right. They echoed. Not loudly, not through the house, but faintly, immediately after she spoke, a mirrored whisper, delayed by half a second, like her voice was being bounced back from a well. "Morning," she said, barely above a whisper. "Morning," came the echo just behind it. She looked around the kitchen. Her mom was pouring coffee, humming a tune. The windows rattled from the wind outside. Nothing seemed out of place. But when she said, "I'm fine," the echo returned, stronger this time. Fine. Too clear. It wasn't in her head. It was in the walls. At school, Nora stayed quiet. She feared what might echo back. But in the bathroom, she accidentally muttered, "I don't want this." And the echo came not from behind, not from inside, but from the mirror. You want this? Only the voice wasn't hers. It was the girl's. That night she sat in her room, lights off, and whispered something she hadn't told anyone. "I think you're real." And from the hallway, faint and broken, "You real?" She followed the sound to the living room. The VCR blinked. The screen turned on, and this time the girl was facing forward, her mouth open, and Nora's own voice came out. Backward. Chapter 5. The Mirror That Rewinds Faces. It started with a glance. Nora had been brushing her hair that evening, trying to hold on to something normal. Her mother had gone out for groceries, promising she wouldn't be long. The house was quiet. Too quiet. She looked up at the mirror above her dresser. Her reflection blinked, then blinked again. Too fast, out of sync. She froze. She raised her hand. So did the reflection. She lowered it. The reflection didn't. Instead, it began moving backward. It walked away in reverse until it disappeared from the glass. Nora spun around. The room behind her was empty, but when she looked back at the mirror, the girl returned. Not her reflection anymore. The girl, the one from the tape, the hallway, the echo. Only now she was closer. Her eyes not black this time, but white, glowing slightly, like overexposed film. The mirror began to shimmer, not crack, but ripple, like water. And then, like a tape rewinding, Nora's own reflection was pulled back into view, moving faster, jerking out of time, eyes wide in silent panic. She reached forward, touched the glass. Cold. The girl's face mirrored hers, mouth opened, no sound. Then her lips began to move. Not words. Name. Mom. Dad. Nora. Then the scream, but reversed again, a horrible sucking cry, one that filled her ears, but not the room. She staggered back, and the glass snapped back to normal. Her own face stared back, pale, afraid. Only now her reflection blinked, after she did. She stepped closer. This time she whispered, "What do you want?" Her reflection didn't echo. Instead, it mouthed something new. Nora felt a sudden tug, like gravity had shifted behind her. Her room spun for a second. She blinked, and for the briefest moment, her reflection smiled. Then it walked away. She screamed and turned to run, but the door to her room slammed shut. The lights flickered. The mirror shimmered again. A knock from inside the glass. 3 sharp raps. She hesitated, reached out again. The surface rippled under her touch. And then her hand didn't come back. She yanked it free, heart racing. The hand that returned wasn't hers. Slightly smaller, fingernails painted red. The girl's hand. Nora backed away until she hit the wall. The light snapped off. The mirror glowed faintly in the dark. Her reflection, no longer hers, stood still. Then it lifted its hand, waved, and turned its back. And Nora, trapped in her own reflection, watched herself walk out of the room. She screamed, but there was no sound, only the ticking of the hallway clock. Back. Chapter 6. A scream pulled inward. Nora hadn't heard a scream like that before, not in real life, not in nightmares, not even in the strange reversed horrors she'd found on the tapes. This one came from inside her. It happened that night when the power flickered and her mom had already gone to bed. The house had dipped into silence, the kind that only existed in those brief moments before something terrible happened. And it did. Nora was brushing her teeth, watching her reflection closely now, unsure of what it might do next, but her reflection behaved. Until the lights cut off completely. Darkness swallowed the bathroom. She stood perfectly still, listening. Then, from deep in the hallway, a giggle. Not playful, guttural. Her hands trembled. She turned slowly toward the door. Another giggle, closer now. Then the air shifted, pressure building in her chest like her lungs were trying to collapse. She couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. It felt like someone was inside her body, pushing up against her skin, trying to reverse her. She opened her mouth, but the sound that came out wasn't hers. It was the reversed scream from the very first tape. Only now it came from inside her. She watched, horrified, as the mirror dimly reflecting the hallway behind her began to warp. The girl's figure appeared, not as an echo, not as a glitch, fully formed. Mouth open, screaming inward, and Nora's body bent forward like a marionette cut from its strings. The lights flicked back on. The girl was gone, but the mirror was cracked, and etched into the fog left behind were the words, "Give it back." Nora didn't know what she had taken, but the scream inside her wouldn't stop. Chapter 7. His voice is missing. The next morning, Nora's mom was gone. Not missing in the sense of lost, she had gone to work. Texted Nora to say she'd be home by dinner, but the house felt emptier than it ever had before. Hollow, as if someone had pressed mute on everything except Nora. So when her cousin Jeremy showed up after school, brought over by his dad to hang out for a few hours, she didn't mind. She almost welcomed it. Jeremy was only 9. Loud, curious, endlessly annoying, but comforting in his noise. He filled the house with chatter, questions, laughter, until he saw the tape. It was just sitting on the coffee table as if it had placed itself there. No label, no dust, still warm. Jeremy picked it up. "What's this?" Nora snatched it from his hand, heart racing. "Don't touch that." But Jeremy was already curious. "Can we play it?" "No." He pouted, but relented. Instead, he wandered into the living room and turned on the TV, flipping through cartoons. 5 minutes later, Nora called his name. No answer. She called again. "Jeremy?" Still nothing. She walked in and found him sitting on the floor, eyes wide, jaw slightly open, muted. He turned to her and opened his mouth. No sound came out, not even a whisper. Panic surged in her chest. She shook him. "Jeremy, say something." His lips moved, but no voice, no breath. Then, behind them, the VCR clicked. A tape had inserted itself. The screen blinked on. It was Jeremy. On screen, alone in a room, mouth open, but the scream was silent, pulled inward, and Nora realized the TV wasn't playing a tape. It was recording one. Chapter 8: The Playground That Plays in Reverse. Nora hadn't been to the park since the screams began. But after what happened to Jeremy, she needed space, somewhere quiet, somewhere that didn't hum with static or flicker like a bad tape. The playground near her elementary school was always empty after sunset, and something about its silence felt safer than the house. Until it didn't. The gate squeaked as she pushed it open. Swings swayed gently in the breeze. The carousel turned lazily. No children, no laughter. Just the creaking of chains and the scuff of leaves across the pavement. Nora sat on a bench, tried to breathe, tried not to think about Jeremy's blank stare, but the wind shifted, and suddenly the playground changed. The carousel spun faster. The swings rocked harder. Then came the sound, distant at first, like whispers on the breeze. Left, but backward. It grew louder, closer, bouncing off the jungle gym, slipping through the tunnels. Nora stood. She looked toward the slide and froze. Chilled, dozens of them, playing but in reverse, running backward across the mulch, climbing down ladders head first, shouting nonsense that unspoke itself as it left their mouths. One girl in pigtails ran toward the swing, laughing. The swing caught her mid-air and pulled her back into the seat. Nora stepped back, heart racing. Then all of them turned to look at her. At once, their mouths opened wide, but no sound came out. Only silence, thick and vibrating. Then, like a tape glitching to life, they screamed in reverse, louder than anything Nora had ever heard. She ran, and behind her the entire playground rewound itself. Back into stillness. Chapter 9: When the clock started screaming. Nora returned home just before sunset, her ears still ringing from the reverberous screams of the playground. She expected the house to be empty, dim, still. What she didn't expect was the sound. The faint ticking, echoing down the hallway. It was the grandfather clock, the one in the living room that hadn't worked since her dad died. Its face was cracked, its hands frozen at 3:33. For years it had been silent. But now it was ticking backward. Nora approached slowly. The closer she got, the more wrong it sounded. Not just the direction, but the tone. Each tick was sharp, high-pitched, like glass cracking under pressure. She stood in front of the clock and stared. The hands moved, jerking counterclockwise, faster than they should. Seconds peeled backward, minutes unpassed. Then the clock struck 3, but instead of a chime, it screamed. The same sucking scream, pulled inward as though the air around her collapsed. Nora stumbled back, covering her ears, but the scream came from inside her mind, vibrating in her skull. The front of the clock bulged, pressed outward. Something was behind the glass. Fingers, small, pale, scratching. Nora reached for the door, hand trembling. As she touched it, the ticking stopped. Silence. Then a voice. "You're running out of time." The door creaked open by itself. The inside was empty, except for a cassette. She picked it up, no label, cold. But as she held it, the air changed. The room darkened, not visibly, but perceptibly, as if the light had been rewound a few seconds into dusk. The shadows moved. The pictures on the wall tilted ever so slightly, and the clock ticked one final time. Then it spoke, not in English, not in words, but in reverse syllables that twisted Nora's stomach. They weren't just sounds, they were commands. A force pushed her gently toward the television, not physically, but through pressure, through suggestion. Her feet moved involuntarily. The VCR had opened. Wait, but before she inserted the tape, she turned back toward the clock. The glass was no longer cracked. It had reset itself. The hands pointed to 3:33 once again. Friesen, and her reflection in the faceplate, just for a moment, wasn't hers. It was the girl's, smiling, mouth open, ticking in reverse. Chapter 10. The Babysitter Who Heard Too Much. Her name was Lila. She was 17, with bright red headphones always looped around her neck and an easy smile Nora didn't trust. Lila had babysat Nora a handful of times before, always on nights when her mom picked up late shifts. But tonight felt different. The moment Lila walked through the door, the house seemed to lean inward. The TV blinked once. The clock ticked louder, and Nora's stomach twisted in ways she couldn't explain. Lila plopped on the couch and kicked her feet up. "So, what's the vibe tonight? Pizza and bad movies?" Nora didn't answer. Instead, she stared at the VCR. It was powered off, but the cassette slot was glowing faintly. Just a pulse. Like it was breathing. Lila noticed. "Is that thing on?" Nora shook her head. "It does that sometimes." "Well, that's creepy," Lila chuckled. "Guess we're not watching anything tonight then." But curiosity tugged at her. Later, after Nora went to her room, Lila stayed on the couch, flipping through her phone. Then the static started. Soft, barely there. She turned toward the VCR. It was empty, but the screen had turned on. A hallway appeared, a figure in the distance. Then the sound. Not music, not a scream, a voice. Low, incoherent. But Lila recognized one word. "Listen." She leaned closer. The voice got louder, still reversed, still wrong. But her headphones buzzed, then sparked. She ripped them off and screamed. From upstairs, Nora heard it. She ran down to find Lila curled in the corner, eyes wide. "I heard her," she whispered. "She's not screaming, she's whispering too loud." And on the TV, Nora saw it. Lila's face, mouth open, playing backward. Chapter 11. Chapter 11. Backwards footprints in the hall. Nora had locked every door, every window. She'd unplugged VCR, thrown away the tapes, and turned every light in the house on. It didn't matter. At exactly 3:33 a.m., she heard it. Not the scream, not the static, not even the voice that sometimes whispered from inside her closet. This time it was footsteps, measured, coming from the hallway. Nora sat up in bed, clutching her blanket like it could somehow protect her. The floorboards outside her room groaned, one after the other, as if someone very small and very careful was walking past. She crept to the door and pressed her ear to the wood. Silence. Then a creak directly on the other side. She flung the door open, heart pounding. No one there, but something was. On the floor. Footprints. Small. Bare. Wet. And reversed. They didn't lead down the hallway. They came from it, leading toward her room, each one slightly distorted, as though the feet had been dragged backward with unnatural precision. She followed them slowly, heart in her throat. They led to the stairs, then down into the living room. The TV was on, no image, just a black screen. But the VCR, still unplugged, had begun to hum. Then she saw it, on the wall near the screen, a reflection that shouldn't have been there. A child, facing backward, as if walking in reverse into the corner. And as Nora stepped into the living room, every footprint on the floor lifted, one by one, as if the steps were being undone. And the child disappeared into the dark, still walking backward, still leaving nothing behind but silence. Chapter 12. The night her mouth opened the wrong way. Nora had started sleeping in her closet. It was the only space in the house that hadn't glitched. No reversed voices, no static, no flickering screens. Just clothes and the faint scent of old fabric softener. Safe, quiet. Until that night. She woke up to silence. Not the kind that comes with peace, but the kind that feels like the world is holding its breath. Even the wind outside had stopped. Not a creak, not a tick. Then a knock. Not at the door. From inside the closet wall. One knock. Then two. Then nothing. Nora pressed her ear to the drywall. Her breath fogged slightly, the space turning cold. Her heart pounded as she whispered, "Who's there?" And the wall whispered back, "You." The plaster cracked. A hand pushed through, pale, slow, reaching like it had forgotten what motion was. Nora stumbled back and, as the drywall split, she saw her. The girl, crawling out, but not on hands and knees. Upside down. Her face was where her stomach should be, twisted backward, eyes on Nora the whole time. And her mouth, it didn't open normally, it peeled sideways like a wound stretching too far until it reached her ear. And from that mouth came no scream, only a word said wrong. Return. Nora tried to scream, but nothing came out. Her own jaw locked, her voice refused to work. The girl crawled closer and the mouth moved again, wider now, impossibly wide, swallowing the air around them. Then a noise, not a scream, not a whisper, a reversed lullaby. Soft, familiar, the song her mother used to sing, but now it was being pulled inward. Note, and when Nora finally cried out, the sound didn't echo. It went straight into the girl's mouth, swallowed, as if it belonged there. Chapter 13. Don't listen to the silence. The silence after the scream was the loudest sound Nora had ever heard. For a full day, the house stayed quiet. No glitches, no whispers, no VCR humming to life. It should have brought her relief, but instead it filled her with dread. It was too quiet. Her mom had left early for work and hadn't returned any texts. The house, bathed in soft afternoon light, felt frozen. Nora tiptoed through the rooms, half expecting the silence to break at any moment. But it didn't. Not until the radio turned on. Not music, just static. It blared in one short burst, then stopped. And then from the speaker came the reversed lullaby again. Just two notes, pulled in, as if trying to undo the very sound it made. Nora unplugged the radio, but the sound kept playing, faintly, from the walls. She clamped her hands over her ears, and that's when she heard the silence speak. Not in words, not in screams, in intention, like something hiding beneath the quiet, waiting for her to relax, to let down her guard. Nora sat in the center of the room, eyes closed, breathing slow. She tried to recall the way her mother's voice used to sound, the warmth of it, the comfort. But even that memory felt warped, then reversed. Then the clock ticked backward again. One, and the silence broke, not with sound, but with motion. Every picture frame in the house fell at once. The lights buzzed, dimmed, and from the living room came a whisper so faint it nearly disappeared. Don't listen. Nora turned slowly. There, standing beside the TV, was the girl, still watching and smiling. The tape was already in the VC, already playing, but there was no sound, only silence. And Nora, without knowing why, began to cry in reverse. Chapter 14. The Child Who Unsaid Everything. Nora didn't speak anymore. Not because she couldn't, but because every time she did, something was taken from her. Words were no longer hers to keep. Each syllable echoed backward, pulled into the walls, into the mirrors, into that girl's gaping mouth. Nora had learned the hard way that even a whisper could invite something she couldn't push back. So she stayed silent, until the night she saw the message. It was scrawled across the bathroom mirror in fogged-up lettering, "Speak or forget." She didn't remember writing it. She didn't remember saying anything, but she was forgetting. Names, moments, the way her mother's voice used to sound, the exact shade of her father's eyes. Each memory unraveling, unspooling, reversing, like the tapes that had haunted her. And the girl, the one who'd taken so much, was growing stronger. Nora could feel it. In the corners of every room, in the reflection of every screen, the girl's presence was thicker, heavier, almost whole. She decided to test it. In the quiet of the kitchen, she said aloud, "Dad." The lights flickered. Her father's photo fell from the mantel. She picked it up, but the frame was empty. No picture, no memory. Panicked, she whispered, "Lila." The phone buzzed on the counter, a missed call. But the name had vanished from the screen. No contact, no record, just a blank space where someone used to be. Nora clutched her chest, trembling. If she said too much, there would be nothing left. But silence was erasing her too. She had one tape left, the one she found inside the grandfather clock. It hadn't been played. Not yet. She placed it into the VCR, her hands trembling. The screen blinked to life, and she saw herself, younger, maybe 5, sitting at a table talking to someone off screen. Only there was no sound. Then the audio kicked in. Not forward, not reversed, erased. A black bar of silence covered everything she had once said. And as Nora watched, the younger version of herself began to fade, piece by piece. First her mouth, then her eyes, then her entire form. Then the girl entered frame. She sat in Nora's place and replayed the same gestures, but with one difference. Her mouth didn't move. She didn't need to speak. The tape fast forward. The older Nora stared at the screen, watching her childhood unravel. She screamed, but the sound didn't escape. It rewound, and from the speaker a voice whispered, "She took your voice. You gave her everything else." The image froze and melted. The tape hissed and spat. The screen went black, except for one word, unsaid. And Nora, for the first time in days, found herself whispering one word back. No, the VCR powered off, but the silence remained. Chapter 15. Reversed into the dark. The house was no longer a home. It was a vessel. Every surface pulsed with the rhythm of things unsaid. The air was thick, soupy, and cold, like it had stopped flowing naturally. Time, too, had bent. Minutes felt like hours, and hours disappeared in a blink. Nora stood in the living room facing the TV. The screen showed nothing but a dark hallway stretching infinitely. No static, no sound, just the image. Waiting. The VCR had locked shut. This was the final tape, the last one. And it didn't belong to someone else, it belonged to her. Nora stepped closer. Her reflection in the blank screen twisted slowly, backward, matching her every breath in reverse. She raised her hand. Her reflection raised the other, as if it were undoing her. Then, behind her reflection, the girl appeared. Not as a flicker, not as a shadow, present and smiling. Nora didn't scream. There was no point. Her voice was gone. Her words belonged to the girl now. But her thoughts were her own. She turned around slowly, and there she was, the girl. Dressed in the same pajamas Nora wore at 5 years old. The same chipped nail polish, the same scar under the eye. She wasn't a stranger. She was Nora, or what was left of her from the moment the first tape played. The room dimmed. The lights pulsed once, then flickered into darkness, leaving only the glow of the screen behind them. The image changed. The hallway on the screen bent and twisted, just like the girl's reflection, pulling inward like a vortex of everything Nora had avoided. Then, the whispers began. One at first, then dozens. Her name, over and over, spoken backward, forward, fractured, a chorus of forgotten versions of herself, echoes that shouldn't exist. She stepped forward, The girl mirrored her, closer, closer, until they stood face to face. Then, like a glitch, the girl opened her mouth, and Nora stepped inside. The world folded in on itself. The TV shattered in silence, but the shattering reversed as quickly as it began, pulling the pieces back into perfect order. Time bent, memory twisted, darkness, silence. But it wasn't cold. It was memory, all of it, playing backward, reel by reel, until Nora's first laugh, her first step, her first word, all undone. But she saw more now, not just her memories, but the others. Every voice the girl had ever taken, every scream unscreamed, every whisper returned. She was part of it now, until there was nothing left. Only a child, sitting alone in a field, mouth open, screaming in reverse. And this time someone, somewhere, was watching, just like she once had.